Okay, I'm back live. There were some connection problems as always, and especially when now I'm in the mountains and the connection is a bit tricky and it's been raining all day, so that doesn't help either. So welcome everybody. I'm really excited to have Vanessa come live, and here she is. And yeah, live from Instagram. I'm in the Himalayas, coming straight from the mountains, the jungles. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. And I'm a bit in the wild zone right now. I'm in the jungles of Himalayas, so the internet is a bit tricky. And I had some snake encounters yesterday. So yeah, I was almost attacked by a snake yesterday. It was very intense,
You're
and
you're more wild than me. This is the wildest thing I have.
yeah, that's pretty. What is that?
What do you? It's a llama. It's a little
Oh,
llama.
it's a llama from Peru.
Yeah. So my daughter loves to leave her toys in the film studio because it's her favorite place to play, of course. So I have to have little distractors for her when she comes in.
I love. Where are you at the moment, Vanessa?
I'm in Austin, Texas. We don't have many llamas here.
But it's a great music scene there, right?
Oh, so listen, Austin, Texas, music, tacos, and heat. If you like those three things, you're gonna love it here. And I just moved here about a year ago.
Yeah, just before everything went a bit wild everywhere. So at least you have a new start.
I don't know if you ever heard this idea that every place has a personality.
Yeah,
And it's this great researcher. His name is Richard Florida, which is kind of funny that his last name is also a place. He did this, right? I think he was meant to do it. He did this great research that looked at that every country, every city has a personality. And he actually did research and found that different parts of the world have different personality types. And so I
yeah,
was born in California. And California, if you think about California, it's where all the Wild West folks came across the US. And
yeah,
so it's dreamers, big dreamers, adventurous folks, and lots of extroverts. And it was
yeah.
too extroverted for me. I'm not that extroverted. So then I moved up to Oregon, which, not that you know the weird US cultural geography, but Oregon is more of like, it's more solid. Got the builders there. And that
Yeah.
was too quiet. That was too quiet for me. And so now I'm in Texas and I'm hoping that this is the right place, just like Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Yeah, I'm sure this is like the perfect balance of California and Oregon. You'll have the quiet and the wild, but you can
It
find your
must be
inner.
similar in India, right? It must be similar. You must have similar kind of cultural like personalities in the parts of the country, right?
Yeah, so actually India and US are very similar in many ways because we're such big countries. And I've lived in the US, so I know US really well. I've
Mm.
backpacked, I've hitchhiked to US. So you know how every state in the US is like its own country?
Yeah.
India is the same. Every state, own culture, own history, even own language. So when you're moving around India, it's like going around a continent. So
So
yeah,
what's the Indian Texas? What's the equivalent?
Indian Texas. That's a good question. I don't.
I would love to hear in the chat if anyone has the equivalent. What's Austin, Texas in India?
Uh, that's I've been to Austin. I would say I would say maybe Pune, which is in Maharashtra. So it's a more it's like it's got a hip scene, but it's not crazy like Mumbai or too chilled out like Goa.
Like, but that would be like New York, right? New York, Miami, LA,
Yeah.
a little
So
crazier.
Mumbai is like New York, and then
Mm.
Delhi is a bit like LA, but no beach. And Miami is more like maybe Goa or Kerala, which is more beachy, and people are always naked and enjoying the sun.
That's
And
Miami. That's
yeah,
Miami.
that's Goa for us.
So I think that it's really important for us to be around people who kind of accept our rhythms, you know? And so if
Yeah,
you're in a very extroverted city and you're an introvert or you're an ambivert, I'm an ambivert, I'm somewhere in between extrovert introvert, and you're in a city full of extroverts, you don't feel like you can be yourself. And I think that
yeah,
that's a horrible existential place to be. And the same if you're an introvert. When I was in Oregon, I felt like I was the extrovert among introverts, and I was always too loud, talked too much. So I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who accept you for you.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you something. I want to ask you, you know, you love people, and it's, you know, I love people, and,
Sometimes,
you know,
sometimes I love people.
sometimes you don't. Okay. And, but it's so interesting to me that you created something about the science of people. And
Mm-hmm.
like, how did this happen for you? Did you always know you were going to do this, or, you know, you were somehow like, it's so interesting because this is like something so random in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's so random, and I don't think that I even knew it was a career option. I will say that I think that right now, especially with this time in the world, everyone's thinking about their passion,
Yeah.
finding their calling, you know,
Yeah.
doing what they love. And I think that that's actually not the right question. Those are not the right questions, because I would never have found my career if those had been my questions. And the reason for that is because I only sometimes love people. In fact, sometimes people make me super nervous and super awkward. But what I knew that I loved, I think that a better question is, how do you like spending your time, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to your personality? So
Yeah.
I knew that I love hard work, but I love to do it on my own time. Like when I'm in my house, in my slippers, I can work for 15 hours. I
Yeah.
knew that I would not do well in a corporate space. I knew that
Yeah.
that would not be my thing. I knew at the time that I wanted to be able to travel. I knew I had to have I didn't want to make travel my full-time life, because I had an inkling that if I was like a stewardess, like if someone had asked me, what's your passion? What do you do what you love? I probably would have been like a stewardess, or I would have worked in the State Department. But I quickly realized if I did what I loved for my job, I think I wouldn't love it anymore.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I want to be able to travel. And so that the only bucket that was left was being an entrepreneur. I was like, okay, I like that idea.
Yeah.
And then I started to research what are the kind of entrepreneurs that are out there. And there are really two different kinds of entrepreneurs that I felt like I could choose from. There are entrepreneurs who are very active. They go after investment. They're engineers, or they do technical things. They go to the Silicon Valley. They, you know, develop the software. I am not technically minded. I can barely turn on my computer. It's amazing that we're on this Instagram live right now. That's
We made it.
We made it. Like, I just feel like I am a technical guru. Like, I feel like I've got it. Okay. So there's that side of it. And I knew that wasn't for me. The other side of it is more of the passive income. So creating assets that work for you. That could be books, that could be courses, that could be things like that. So I knew from the beginning I wanted to teach, and I wanted to do it with books and courses. And then it took about 5 years to find this topic of the science of people. But I never set out to start with this topic, actually.
Very, very interesting. So when you were young, were you always kind of in the back of your head subconsciously studying people,
Yeah.
or were you always, you know, looking at people a bit differently than others, observing them more, or just silently sitting in the corner? Were you shy as a kid, or you were more out there?
So I wasn't shy. I was very awkwardly ambiverted. In other words, I really wanted to be at the cool kids table, but I wasn't
Yeah.
at the cool kids table. So like I didn't hide because I didn't want to be there. I really wanted to be invited. I just never was. So what that happens if you've ever been in a situation where there's a group of people that you really want to know. They can be
Yeah.
the cool kids, the bosses, the insiders, however you want to define it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting place to be because it makes you an observer, right? You're on the
Yeah.
outside. So you're not a participant is a better word. You're not a participant, you're an observer. And so because of that, I was able to observe how they worked. Like, how was it that this one kid could walk into the cafeteria and everyone looked and everyone wanted to know them. And what I early on realized is it's not the obvious things. Like, if you ask someone what makes someone popular, even as adults, most people would guess looks, so like being very attractive. Maybe like in high school, like athletic prowess, like were they jocks, were they strong? And then were they really smart? Were they the smartest kids, the highest GPA? It's actually not those three things. And there was a study that was done in the US, and I would love to see this study done in other countries. A researcher named Van Sloan decided to research thousands of popular kids. And so he went into all these high schools, and he created these maps of the social hierarchy, like the cool kids, the not cool kids. And can you guess what the one factor was that predicted popularity?
None of that.
None of that. None of it. I gave you a lot of hints. It wasn't any of those three things.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah.
No, continue. Then I'll ask you the question.
Okay. So what he found is that the kid who liked the most other kids, the kid who had the longest list of people he or she liked, that was the most popular kid. In other words, and this puts us in control of our popularity. I think that my biggest mistake in high school was that I was waiting for other people to like me, right? Like I didn't want to be the first liker. You know, we're afraid with our liking, like, I don't want to like first, like, then I might get rejected, or I don't want to like them first because then, like, you know, what if they don't like me back and it's really awkward? So I was waiting, I was withholding my like. But actually, the most popular kids are like, hey, James, hey, Sarah, hey, Mark. They're the ones who say hi first, they smile first, they wave first, they initiate liking first, and that in turn makes them more likable.
Yeah.
That changed my life. That study changed my life.
When did that happen for you?
So I read that study pretty early on, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, because I've been doing this work for about 14 years. And for about 7 of those years, it was just observing body language. The very first kind of 7 years of my business were very heavy body language, nonverbal facial expressions. And I love that. It's a lot of captivate. But then I discovered that study and I was like, that is the key to popularity. And that is the key to so many things. And so that's when I started writing about communication, people skills, charisma, because it was a very different perspective than, you know, be influential, be attractive, be the smartest person in the room. It's nothing to do with that.
Yeah, yeah. And also I think it's so interesting, like we talk about these things and, you know, in a normal dinner table conversation, if you're talking about, oh, who likes what and blah, 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 you know, we're talking about it on a very superficial scale. But if you go deeper into it, like it affects everything in your life and human spectrum in general, like people who become politicians, who become leaders. Why do they become leaders? Why some people get on top of the organization, even though they don't have the skills, but people like them. And I find it so fascinating. It's really just amazing how it works. So I want to ask you an interesting question. You know, we're living in very interesting times, as you know, and you know, all of us know, and that heavily affects our communication and how we communicate with one another. At the same time, you know, us staying indoors all the time also affects with our mental health dramatically, which, you know, you and I know we're facing it with, you know, consumers, students all the time. So how is this like technological use affecting our day-to-day like science in terms of science people? How is this time affecting us in your opinion?
Yeah. So I think I'm immediately, as soon as COVID started happening, I realized, wow, all of our communication needs, all of our connection needs are going to happen through devices, most of them at least. And there's some really interesting science here, which is that video is a great form of communication, but it comes with a couple of special notes that we should keep in mind. The first is that we tend to think video is more casual, right? Like you can only see this much of me right now. Like you can't see that I'm in my slippers. Like I'm literally in my fuzzy slippers. You can't see that, right? So I come to this call and I'm on my pajamas on the bottom and I'm an Instagram ready on the top, right? So I think, oh, it's more casual. But actually, video chat is even more intimate. And the reason for that is because if we were in person right now, we would actually be about this far apart. Like if you could only see someone's face, you're really close. And our brain, it's called proxemics, which is the distance between people. When we're this close to each other, it's actually a forced sense of intimacy. So when people are this far apart, 6 inches apart, it usually means they're very intimate, right? Like they're talking very intimately, they're sharing secrets, they're maybe even whispering. When your brain is this close to someone, as we are right now, even though we're not really, our body is actually in a state of alert.
Mm,
So if we were standing this close in person, we would be like, like it would be way too close. And so
mm,
videos actually create a lot of emotional, like there's a lot of emotional tax. So we go into a video thinking, oh, it's just a video. It's casual. But actually, the reason why we get Zoom fatigue, the reason why we're getting video call fatigue, the reason why we're like, I am exhausted by the end of a video call is because our brain is working extra hard because it thinks, oh my gosh, someone's in my intimate space, even though you're
oh,
not actually in my intimate space. And so it's this
interesting.
weird, it's breaking our feedback loop. And that's why you see I joke that the first start of a video call, we're like this. And then like 20 minutes and we're like, yeah, mm-hmm. And then like a little farther and we're like, yeah, mm-hmm. And then by the end we're like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. It's because it's so taxing for our brains to do that.
Are you saying this is a good like first date in many ways? Because for humans to, meet somebody online and just have a video call, that is actually them being more intimate in many ways.
So the science would say that from a proxemics perspective, yes, it's forcing intimacy.
Mm,
However, we are missing oxytocin. So
mm,
oxytocin, do I have it? Oxytocin, let's see, I have it on my back. So that's dopamine, which is the chemical of pleasure and excitement.
yeah,
That's oxytocin, a very complicated, can you see it? Let's see, there we go. So
yeah.
oxytocin is really important for connection. It's like the chemical of trust and
Mm,
belonging.
mm,
Oxytocin happens from touch, handshake, hug, high five, cheek kiss, eye
mm,
contact, and then like
mm,
mutual experiences. The problem
mm,
is that we are making some eye contact. So studies have shown that you can get oxytocin through a screen, but I'm bouncing between your eyes and my camera. So right now I'm looking at the camera, but I'm not getting eye contact back. For right now, I'm
yeah,
looking at you. And so
yeah.
we're getting a little bit of oxytocin, but not nearly as much if we were on a date. So
So
the good news is it's not all bad.
I want to ask you, so, we're very social animals, humans, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think deep down, everybody wants happiness and they want to be appreciated and they want intimacy, even if
Yeah.
it's a friendly intimacy and whatever. We just like touching people. It doesn't matter which culture, there are cultural
Yeah.
appropriations, but we like touch. We like to feel the other
Yeah.
person. And I don't know how spiritual you are, but in the spiritual world, we call, energies. Like we love vibing with people who have a
Yeah.
similar vibe. So all of that has gone down the drain at the moment. So how do you think that's affecting us emotionally as human beings? Because I personally feel a lot of people are feeling very lonely, and they are feeling like, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's very natural feeling to feel lonely, and people are feeling like left out. They're feeling sad for not being able to connect with other human beings on a physical level.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. Well, the first thing is to understand why, I think. I think once we understand why, it helps us not blame ourselves or be hard on ourselves, which is
Mm,
that we are wired to be social in the sense of like, if we don't have people around us back in our caveman days, we couldn't survive.
yeah,
So we are wired to feel connection. And so
yeah,
it is absolutely, it means you are human and you are functioning well if you're feeling lonely.
yeah,
So reframing that loneliness does not mean you're doing something bad.
mm,
Loneliness does not mean that you've done something wrong. Loneliness actually means great job. You're doing a fabulous job being human. That's the first thing.
yeah,
That is your brain's desire to try to stay safe and happy with you.
yeah,
So that's the first thing is don't hate it, don't judge it. Be like, yes, this is my humanity. Like this is my
yeah,
humanity. The second thing is there are ways that we can trigger the really essential chemicals from those interactions. So the three chemicals that we really like, the reason why we're social is we're constantly craving dopamine, excitement, and pleasure that we get from other people.
mm,
Oxytocin, chemical connection and trust. And
mm,
serotonin is the last one, which is belonging. We can absolutely create those in digital spaces. They're not as easy, but we can create them. And one of the best ways to do this is with what's called a social ritual. So social rituals are vastly underrated. I don't know why we don't talk about them more. We often say, oh yeah, I want to do a happy hour with my friends. That's half the way there. What's even better is making it a ritual or adding rituals into it. And the reason for that is because our bodies love predictability. We love when we know we can depend on something. And so instead of having to organize one-off get-togethers or one-off dates, you're actually better off joining a weekly book club, or starting a monthly happy hour, or doing every Monday morning your work team has coffee together for 20 minutes.
So some kind of structure into your routine, which allows you to connect with people in a manner where it's predictable and it's something that you can rely on.
And someone asked, what about group chats? I love a group chat. I love a group chat because it's a great way to have little bursts of oxytocin, especially if you're sending like funny gifs or funny videos. You get dopamine. When the group has a Me Too moment, like everyone feels the same way, you get serotonin. What I would encourage is if you have a group chat, add a ritual to it. So for example, we have a post we have on our blog called 36 Deep Questions. Every week, put one of the questions in the group and make it so that every Monday the whole group is doing a question together, or every Friday it's gift Friday, everyone shares their favorite gif on Fridays, or on Tuesdays everyone shares their favorite TED Talk. If you add a little bit of ritual even to a group, it's a game changer in terms of our chemical, and it makes us feel like we have a community we can depend on.
Lovely. So on addition to that, do you think more and more, so I know about Western cultures, Western cultures, people are quite isolated already, they're living in their own apartments.
Yeah.
Very individualistic lives. I don't know if you've been or if you've seen Asian cultures or African cultures. They're very community-driven cultures, right? Like people are, it's all about community, and, it's really tough to social distance and follow that individual drive in a country like India because it's so community drawn. Even the architecture, it's like really community. So I want to ask you, do you think in the West and even in India and countries where people are living in their own space, do you think people are, because of this corona thing, they are kind of going back into their shell and are staying there and want to stay away from people or something like that? Do you think that's happening on a psychological scale?
Yeah, I do. And I also think that there's something, and this is not a psychological concept. This is just something I've observed. I think we all have like social muscles. In other words, like we have to get in the habit of being like, hey, good morning. Hey, neighbor, how are you? Like we have these muscles that we flex. And I have this bad sense, very personally, I've also seen it, that we are not only our like muscles are getting flabby, like our social muscles are flabby, but also that we're developing other muscles, which is like, stay away from me. Right? We're like, all of a sudden my conversations are so much farther away, and now I don't even think about it. And I think that might stick. I also have a 2-year-old daughter. So she has had very little socialization. She was 1.5 years when we stopped seeing people. And now when we're in our front yard and neighbors walk by, she says, no.
Wow. For kids, it's like they don't even know what was it like before. So for them, this is how they're evolving in many ways, no? Wow. I hope that's it's like a reversible trend.
What I keep telling myself is social muscles can be flexed, right? But also every one of her peers will have had the same thing. So maybe this generation will be a little different. Maybe they'll speak farther apart. Maybe the opposite. Maybe they'll be so craving oxytocin and belonging that they'll be huge huggers. We don't know, but at least she's going through something that everyone in the world is going through at her age. Every 2-year-old right now is not being socialized the way that they're normally socialized.
Yeah. Interesting. Maybe we'll have like another kind of, there's introvert, extrovert, ambivert, and something else that will come up in the coming.
A makeup-avert, a COVID-avert.
something. I want to ask you, so, even in these times, like what's been your fire? What's helping you wake up every morning? And what's, also tell us a bit about your book, Captivate. I would love to talk about that.
Yeah, there it is. Woo-hoo. And I
can you show it again?
Yeah, sure. And I know it's in India too.
Yay.
I don't know what it's been translated into yet. Where it's in 16 languages so far, so I'd have to look at which
Wow.
ones. But gosh, my fire right now. So interestingly, there's always silver lining, right? So COVID, in a weird way, while it limited our space in social situations, right? Like I can't go socialize, I can't do events or conferences anymore, I can't teach live anymore. In a weird way, it also created a lot more space in my life, in the sense of all of a sudden I'm not traveling. All of a sudden I have way less speaking events. And so the space that I got in my life allowed me to finally think of my second book idea. So I'm actually working on my next book, which is very exciting. And that happened about 6 weeks into COVID because I had all this free space in my head. And so I'm working on my next book, which I'm very excited about. And what's cool is I'm finally able to learn from what happened with the first book. So people are reading Captivate right now. They send me messages, they send me emails, and I'm able to look and say, okay, what was missing? What do they want as their next step? And so I'm writing again, which is so exciting.
Nice. So what's in Captivate? What will readers get out of it?
Yeah. So Captivate is the manual, the textbook I wish I had growing up for people. So it's I feel like I spent a lot of time learning algebra and chemistry and history, and I never learned the basics of conversation. What is the formula for conversation? What is a social blueprint for where to stand in a room? Like if you walk into a birthday party, I don't know about other awkward people. Are there other awkward people here? I don't know if there are other. So if you're an awkward person.
Probably a lot.
Okay. So if you're an awkward person and you walk into a birthday party or a networking event or a holiday party or even like a break room, you're faced with this what do I do? Where do I go? What do I do with my hands? Do I smile? All these questions. And so in the book, I actually create maps of rooms of where to stand, what to do with your hands, how to make the right kind of eye contact, and then more advanced, how to develop relationships on a deeper basis, which I always wanted to know. Okay, you meet someone on a date or a colleague and you like them. Then what? What do we do next? And so the first part of the book is the first 5 minutes. The second part of the book is the first 5 hours. And the last part of the book is the first 5 days. In other words, how do you do each of those steps?
I love it. It's such a relevant book for these times because I think people are going to be so awkward for so many social interactions in their lives, including myself. First time I kind of left again to come to the mountain, I was like, people, I forgot about so many people. And, thankfully I could, switch my mind quickly and work around it. But I think it will be a challenge for many, many people. So I'm glad you have written a book about that. And what are you writing next? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So next, so Captivate is very much about the big thing, conversations, presenting yourself, first impressions. I wanted to, in COVID, I was thinking about what are some of the smaller things we do? And so this next book is going to be about our micro messages, the very subtle things that we do that indicate how warm we are, how trustworthy we are, how competent we are, and kind of the 80-20 principle. How can we focus on those smaller things that give us so much benefit? And so I'm going to be looking into all of our micro messages.
So aren't a lot of our micro messages very subconscious? We do it very subconsciously?
Yeah. So I'll be talking about what are the subconscious ones and how do we read them? So if someone else is interacting with you and they do something and you're like, what is that, one-sided mouth raise? That's a way to examine, they didn't mean it. It's subconscious versus the ones that we can actually control. And there's quite a few that we can control. And those are where I think the real power is.
Love it. Okay. So Vanessa, thank you so much for joining in for me.
Yes, you're so welcome.
I want to send you a namaste because I think namaste is a good way to greet nowadays.
Yes, totally.
Thanks and the gift of India for the world. And I'm in a very sacred place right now, so I'm sending you a lot of love. And
I'll take it.
It's one of the most sacred places on earth, they say. Self-retreat, meditating for weeks now. And so I'm sending you a lot of love and best wishes and everything. And telepathically, I'm sending you a lot of love and good vibes and all the all the energy for your upcoming projects. And if you have something to share with us for one last time, feel free.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Um, first of all, thank you so much. Thank you for that energy. I think we all need it. And sort of the last thing I'll say to everyone else is, we need moments like this. Like I want to say major kudos to you for watching this, because it means you took a moment out of your day to learn something, to get inspired, to have community. This is community too. This is the community that we have that's really important. So I just want to thank you for taking some time out for you. I want to thank you so much for having me and bringing me on, letting me talk about my passion and my book, and wish me luck on my next project. Boy, am I going to need it.
Yeah, I will order your book for sure, and I'll tell you how it was. Definitely.
Fabulous. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Take care.